And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.
Welcome back to the Liberty Podcast. It is the 19th day of April, 2024. We're so glad you found us here in our cozy studio beneath the pines in Moore County. It is a beautiful Friday with a few rain showers now having passed by. And I just want to give you an advance warning that next week there will be no podcast. Now, don't panic. There's nothing wrong. It's actually going to be a joyous occasion. The wedding of my favorite and only daughter, 1 week from Saturday. A joyous affair. You know, it's been a long countdown. It's quite a production, couples getting married these days. It's not just find a pastor in a church and a bag of rice. Quite to the contrary. In fact, I would say of this forthcoming Broadway play known as A Destination Wedding, that only Hunter Biden's contacts in China and Ukraine have received more wire transfers than the people behind the organization of this wedding. And I'm trying to smile my way through my way through the agony, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, just as before we were about to start rolling the podcast today, a man in New York City outside of the courthouse where Donald Trump is allegedly on trial set himself on fire. Now, I'm thinking to myself, if the Democrats keep setting themselves on fire, it doesn't matter how many illegal immigrants the Biden administration allows to pass through the southern border, all the registered voters are going to be charred little memories of themselves, little crispy creatures, with their little, manifestos burned up in their little paws. So anyway, this actually happened. But I bring that up because it's actually shocking that we didn't see this happen earlier this week around one of the campuses in the Triangle, whether it be UNC Chapel Hill or Duke or NC State or out at Woke Forest outside of Winston-Salem. Because guess what happened? I mean, this is good news, and I don't get to say that very often, so I want to share this with you in case you missed it. Administrative positions and offices dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion are likely to be eliminated at all public universities across North Carolina following a vote on April 17 by members of the board that oversees the campuses. The UNC System Board of Governors University Governance Committee, that's a mouthful, approved a policy that repeals the university system's existing policy and regulation on diversity and inclusion, which require each of the state's 17 public campuses to employ diversity officers and work toward achieving diversity-related goals, among other requirements. Yeah, achieving a lot of diversity goals and not achieving the purpose of the institution, which is education and to prepare productive citizens for the workplace. That ain't been happening. The committee passed the policy unanimously and with no discussion. Wow, the open session portion of the meeting lasted for 5 minutes. Now, it's important to understand why these DEI policies, which are disappearing all over the country, Florida, Texas, Iowa, and now North Carolina. How about that? Take that, you Dems. The problem with the DEI Iron Boot is that it was a solution looking for a problem. And this is addressed by UNC System President Peter Hans. He says There is broad and deep commitment to the goal of serving students of all backgrounds and beliefs, and support for the UNC system's long-standing effort to reflect the diversity of North Carolina. In other words, on its face, there's nothing really wrong with an emphasis or an awareness of diversity, as long as it doesn't become a religion. We have well-established laws and policies that prohibit discrimination, protect equal opportunity, and require a safe and supportive learning environment for all students. We uphold those responsibilities. Right. The policy, as passed, now goes to the full 24-member board for consideration at its May meeting. At that meeting, the policy is likely to be considered on the consent agenda, meaning the board could vote on the policy without further discussion. The board's action targeting diversity efforts is similar to that of Florida, which eliminated DEI in its public college campuses through legislation last year. That's a really good development. They were sort of at the tip of the spear, and that was Christopher Rufo, the excellent author and education reformer, who was largely behind that. Anyway, this is very good news, and basically they're going to have to start dismantling these departments, lickety split. So say goodbye to DEI. Yeah, like the way that sounds, don't you? All right, let's move on. We've got a lot to get to today. By the time I'm done, 2 or 3 other Democrats will probably be setting themselves on fire somewhere in front of TV cameras. They only do it when they're going to get publicity. They're not as dumb as they look, I guess. Hey, this is good news for those of us who would like to see the Biden campaign sweating in the state of Michigan. Good news came this morning when independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. confirmed that he will be on the ballot in Michigan this November, which will make it harder for President, so-called Biden, to keep the state in the Democratic column. The Michigan Secretary of State's office confirmed that Kennedy will be listed as an option on the November 5 election ballot after he and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, were nominated for president and vice president by the Natural Law Party. Whatever. Kennedy, 70 years old, was polling at 13% in a recent survey conducted by Marketing Resource Group. In a five-way matchup, the poll found, five-way presidential matchup in Michigan, the poll found former President Trump received 37% support, Biden 34%, Green Party candidate Jill Stein 2%, and Cornel West, Corny West, as I like to call him, 1%. The survey also showed Kennedy edging Biden into third place among self-described independent voters, with Trump getting 33% of the independent demo, RFK Jr. 22%, and Daughter and Old Joe 21%. Well, you know what this has done? This has set off panic in the Biden campaign among the Democrats, and it has also caused a big stir within the Kennedy family, the dynastic Kennedy family. They all got together and whipped up a video for social media in which numerous of the Kennedy clan, Bobby Jr.'s siblings and whatnot, nieces and nephews, on and on. There's a lot of Kennedys, always have been. They whipped up a little video production in which they're all urging Democrats to save the democracy and vote for Joe Biden and all the policies that have done such wonders for our economy, our global presence, our energy production, and crime. All these things that have improved so dramatically, not under the Biden regime. So the Kennedys, it was funny. One of the commentators said they all looked like they were in a hostage video. You know, it was sort of like, well, we don't really want to go on a video and trash our Uncle Bobby Jr., but, you know, the Dems say we do it, we do it. That's the family rule, right? Okay, how about this? I'm not making this up. I know these sound like headlines out of The Onion sometimes, but this is a real headline from thehill.com. This went out just after midnight this morning when Joe Biden was in his 6th hour of deep sleep. Democrats help advance Ukraine-Israel aid in rare rules move. Now, the Democrats helped the Republicans. Really? Listen to this. The House Rules Committee, late Thursday night into this morning, Friday morning, the 19th, advanced a package of foreign aid bills, but only with help from Democrats who, in a rare move, supported the procedural vote amid opposition from a trio of hardline Republicans. Have you ever noticed how when Republicans want to stand up for their principles and values, they're hardliners, but you never see that phrase applied to a Democrat, a hardline Democrat. They're just Democrats, right? Because, everything that they seek to do legislatively is just fine. Nothing controversial to see here. Let's move along. So the successful vote allows the full House to vote on the rule, which may happen Saturday, April 20. For those of you using the traditional calendar, that would be one day from now, which is the 19th. Tomorrow is the 20th. See how that works? This would allow the rule to go onto the floor with open debate on 3 foreign aid bills. Okay. Each bill would send billions of dollars, billions, to Israel, Ukraine, and the Indo-Pacific, which is mainly, we're talking about Taiwan and its defense against any future threats from China. All right, so we're sending Israel $26.38 billion. At least we know what they're going to do with it. The next time Iran tries to drop a mother load on them, they're going to take those suckers out of the sky with their Iron Dome. We're going to send $60.84 billion with a B to Ukraine. We've already sent them, I don't know, a couple $100 billion to date. And they're not doing very well. And we don't know where the money goes in most cases, except if it goes to the battlefield, I don't know what they're doing with it. And then we're going to send $8.12 billion to the Indo-Pacific region. And they like to keep that vague, don't they? Indo-Pacific. And then another bill, a fourth bill, would address national security priorities, including the ban of TikTok. Like here we are. I mean, I understand the pitfalls of TikTok and how it can be abused by communist China. But to put that in the same conversation with national defense on battlefields, especially when you're dealing with Israel under assault by Iran and its surrogates such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Are you kidding me? Anyway, it makes you want to throw up, but I did all of that before I came on, so you wouldn't have to see it. It's my little courtesy I provide. Also included in the rule is language that says if the House approves each of the 4 bills, they will be merged together and sent to the Senate as one package. See how tidy that is? Then we forget who's getting what and where the money's going. Just pass the bill. That's their mindset. And the Democrats are helping feckless House Speaker Mike Johnson do that. That's how pathetic this situation is. This is what a weak leader Mike Johnson is, despite what you may be hearing about how brave he is to stand up to help the Ukrainians and the Israelis. It's quite bizarre. By the way, if the platforms, also in the fourth bill, you're going to like this, has language in there. This is the TikTok, the fourth of the 4 bills. Language in there to send some of the new Ukrainian aid in the form of a loan. All right, you tell me. I'll bet you dollars to donuts we will never be repaid a dime of this so-called loan. As if that's going to take the sting out of adding to our $34.6 trillion debt with billions more now going out the door. Meanwhile, nary an adult discussion in the House or the Senate about the ongoing crisis at the southern border. Not the Ukraine-Russia border, not the Israeli Gaza-Lebanon border. No. The U.S.-Mexico border. That gets ignored 100%, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And this is an interesting conundrum that these folks have when they want to keep spending the money, sending it over to the grifters in Ukraine. Joe Biden was allowed to have an article with his name on it. We call it an op-ed. I call it a nap-ed since he wrote it, It was in the Wall Street Journal on the 18th of April, in which he conflates the necessity of funding both Israel and Ukraine as showing our leadership. And because we can't turn our backs on Ukraine now, look at all the progress they've made. This is in his op-ed, his nap-ed. Look at all the progress Ukraine has made. They're winning on the battlefield. Well, on April 17th, the day before this was published, here's what we hear from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who, I don't know, does Biden not talk to these people? Whether it's munitions, whether it's vehicles, whether it's platforms, Ukraine is being outmatched by the Russians, said General C.Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in testimony before the House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. I'll just tell you that Ukraine right now is facing some dire battlefield conditions. Then Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, seated alongside C.Q. Brown. It's a good thing his name isn't D.Q. Brown. Then we could make some Dairy Queen jokes. But anyway, Secretary Lloyd Austin, you remember Lloyd? He's the one who secretly went to the hospital and didn't tell anybody last year. That was nice, wasn't it? Lloyd says, we're already seeing things on the battlefield beginning to shift a bit in Russia's favor. We are seeing them make incremental gains. We're seeing the Ukrainians be challenged in terms of holding the line. Okay, so is throwing money at their woefully ill-equipped armies, and I'm talking about in terms of manpower, not just technology and ammunitions, is throwing money going to make a difference? But no coincidence that in Washington, their grim assessments came as House Republicans are wrangling over the foreign aid bill. So, of course, these guys got to go and lie in front of a subcommittee and make the situation sound as dire as possible so that, you know, they'll pass the bill. Without the United States assistance, Ukraine will literally run out of ammunition and more civilians in Ukraine will be murdered by Russia. This, according to Democrat Congresswoman Betty McCollum in that same testimony. C.Q. Brown told lawmakers, meanwhile, that Israel also critically needs support, including air defense interceptors and munitions. Well, maybe that's so, but, you know, what we saw last weekend when Iran tried to, you know, retaliate, quote unquote, was that Israel is very well prepared as long as they've got some help from us, which they deserve because they're an important ally. They're not a bunch of grifters from one of the most corrupt nations in the world, Ukraine. And by the way, public opinion also, it's not just me and 3 or 4 Republicans in Washington like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Dan Bishop and Jim Jordan who are saying this. An April survey of swing or moderate voters. So these are moderate, maybe independent voters, not hardcore Republicans, not Democrats. In 6 battleground states, April survey suggests the impact of an open southern border is concerning them more than events in Ukraine. This reported April 16 in the Epoch Times, excellent publication. Commissioned by the Conservative Heritage Foundation, another excellent organization, and executed by a nonpartisan research poll organization, the survey revealed that 56% of those voters, the swing voters in these 6 states, felt the $113 billion price tag for Ukraine support thus far was either too much or far too much. Ukraine support thus far was either too much or far too much. That's what I said. Just 14% thought the United States had not spent enough on military aid for Ukraine. 14%. I mean, that's a fraction of the people saying, yeah, send more money. When asked to compare the importance of border security with that of Ukraine funding, 50% chose the border, while only 11% chose Ukraine. 29% said they were equally important. This was 1,000 swing voters interviewed in Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all states that the Biden campaign has got to win. They're swing states for a reason. Trump can win them all, and he's poised to right now, according to a number of polls. So the Democrats in Congress are pushing the Republicans to keep funding Ukraine. Joe Biden is writing a nap ed in the Wall Street Journal saying the same thing, and yet the people they need voting for them in the fall are telling them to do the opposite. So they're so arrogant and so brain dead that they can't even listen to their own potential voters who are chiming the death knell in these states that are going to be razor thin in terms of how they come out in the fall. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Michigan took a turn today because of the now the arrival of Bobby Kennedy Jr. onto the ballot, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. will end up on all 50 ballots. You can count on that. Don't hold your breath. Speaking of Democrats who lie with impunity and have a track record that is abominable, get this. Now, we have an attorney general in North Carolina named Josh Stein. I like to call him Little Josh. He's running for governor to replace King Roy Cooper, who's finally running out of time to rule over his minions here in North Carolina. So Josh is the attorney general. He's running for governor. He raced to the microphones this week, flanked by 24 law enforcement officials, to announce gleefully that North Carolina has ended its rape kit backlog. Now you may say, what in the world is a rape kit backlog? Rape kits are the medical technological devices that are used to, in the aftermath of a terrible rape of an innocent woman, to determine if the DNA of the rapist is present, to be traced and potentially used to bring about convictions and jail and long jail terms, we hope. Now, this backlog goes back to like 2019, okay? And at one point in time, North Carolina was number one in the nation for having the most backlogged rape kits, meaning you've got thousands. The number was this. When Cooper ran for governor in 2016, he claimed that he had cleared a 5,000 deep DNA testing backlog from when he first took office as Attorney General. He was Attorney General for 16 years. Can you believe that? Yet when Stein became Attorney General in 2016, North Carolina still ranked number one in the country with more than 15,000 untested rape kits. So that's 15,000 potential rape victims who are not getting the potential justice they deserve from the law enforcement in this state. It's unbelievable. Under the Survivor Act, an inventory audit conducted in 2019, the revelation came forward that there were more than 16,000 untested. So the number even got worse. The U.S. Department of Justice has been sending millions of dollars to help North Carolina overcome this terrible blight on its rape kit protocols. And as is correctly pointed out, what is Josh Stein celebrating? That we were now no longer the least worst? I mean, what? After 8 years, Josh Stein finally has completed a basic function of his job as Attorney General, according to NC Republican Party Communications Director Matt Mercer. After 8 long years, the state crime lab has cleaned up the mess left by his predecessor, Governor Roy Cooper, during his 16-year reign of terror as Attorney General of this state. So just remember, when you're talking about little Josh Stein running for governor, what his legacies are. Okay? Bumbling of the rape kit operations, deliberately tying up in courts for years a law passed by you and I to require photo ID at polling places on election day. He tied that up for years in courts, claiming that it was racist and unconstitutional. Well, he lost on that because earlier this year, during primary voting, voters across the state finally were required to present a photo ID in order to vote. That's part of his legacy, that he's running against Mark Robinson, our Republican, for governor. So keep that in mind when they start barraging you with campaign ads. Now, speaking of candidates for this fall, I attended a Q&A earlier this week with a young lady named Michelle Morrow, who is running for superintendent of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Now, that's not the State Board of Education. This is a different body, but it is an elected head, and she is running. She upset the incumbent, you might recall, in the primary, and now she'll be facing Mo Green. So remember, Morrow, not Mo. That's the way to go. She is an energetic candidate, first time running for a statewide office. And I was very impressed by her energy, by her passion. She pointed out some very important things, that when it comes to education, we're really not raising children, we're raising adults. And she reminded us that today's second grader in just 10 years' time from now will be a voter. And we have seen how the educational system, beginning in K through 12, has gradually indoctrinated our students over time, so that when they come out and they get to be voting age, they are woke, they are extremely lacking in pride for their country. They believe the narrative that we are systemically racist, and they like to vote for a lot of crazy Democrats. But she points out that even though the Department of Public Instruction does have some limitations in terms of dealing with the State Board of Education that is right now controlled by Democrats, she said she does have the ability to review and audit contracts with various educational organizations. And if they're really woke and really committed to DEI and critical race theory, she can cancel them and go find new ones. She said that she has the ability to guide policymaking if elected to run the DPI. All we've heard from the current Republican superintendent of public instruction for the last nearly 4 years, Catherine Truitt, is that she just doesn't have any power, that she's hamstrung, she can't do anything. And that's just simply not true if you listen to Michelle Morrow. She says that these school districts that are deliberately rejecting the state law that requires a parental bill of rights to be observed, to be recognized and imposed on the school districts. She said it's real simple. These districts that won't recognize it, like Wake County where she lives, you just defund them. You defund the schools. You literally take their money away. Now you would say, well, what about the children? Well, what about the children when they're being groomed behind their parents' back, transgenderized behind their parents' back, taught all kinds of mistruths and lies about the history of our country? What's worse? You could argue better to defund and let the parents of those kids go find alternates to education. And that's the other point she made, though. She made this point very importantly. She said the only way that we can save our children from continuing down this path of indoctrination is to revive and restore public education the way it was in a time and place in the past in this country. She said, if we don't make public education excellent, we lose the school choice arena. We lose in the arena of school choice. And yes, she's absolutely right about that. So just remember, very important, this fall, you need to be informed on all these races because they all impact your lives in one way or another. Don't dismiss beyond president and down the ballot, president and governor and lieutenant governor. These elections for Department of Public Instruction, as one example, really matter. So remember, you don't want to elect the radical Marxist Mo Green, the Democrat candidate, former director of the Z. Smith Reynolds super Marxist BLM funding organization. You don't want Mo, you want Morrow, because Mo's got to go. Okay? And so do I, because that's going to wrap up this Liberty podcast. We're so glad you joined us again. We hope to see you next time right here on the Liberty Podcast.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.